Thank you for taking the time to do this.
You're welcome.
So just for the benefit for the students who are going to be in the global orchestra, can you give a little bit of background to your musical career before you became a teacher?
Yeah, sure. I graduated from the Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester, which is one of the sort of the top 4 music colleges in the UK. My first job as a musician was as a trombone player on a cruise ship on the QE2. I was there for a year, basically playing for the cabaret acts and the shows and the dancing and all that kind of stuff. Pretty much the best year of my life. Seeing the world, travelling every ocean, playing music every night. Pretty much perfect. I then moved to London and basically spent 12 years as a freelance musician. I was trombone in about 20 to 30 different West End shows, played in some of the orchestras, including the London Philharmonic. I did some TV work, some film score sessions, things like that, a few pop jingles, all that kind of stuff, alongside a bit of teaching as well, instrumental teaching. I've spent a few years writing and arranging for various groups, touring with artists, just a general kind of freelance kind of career with lots of variety in a sort of musical career. And now I'm a teacher. You say it as though it's a different path. It's not. I see myself. I've always said this. I don't see myself as a music teacher. I always see myself as a musician who teaches. And I always strongly feel there's a difference between the two. I still consider myself as much of a musician, much of a performer as I ever was. It's just now I'm sort of passing on knowledge rather than just producing the music myself. So I see it as a sort of the next step of my career rather than a different career.
And obviously now you're musical director for the Global Orchestra, so what exactly does that entail?
It's been quite a lot, really. It's a lot of fun. So I was involved with the idea of creating the repertoire, deciding what repertoire we would play. Obviously the sort of hodgepodge of musicians that we've got, we haven't really got a sort of a specific set ensemble. It's been various numbers of different instruments, so I've had to sort of create a group out of that and then produce music written especially for that group. There would be no point, for example, having a full orchestral piece of music because we don't have double basses, we don't have violas, we don't have bassoons, we don't have tubas or trombones or French horns, so we couldn't just take the standard version of music and play that. So I've had to adapt, in many of the cases, adapt the music to suit the ensemble that we have. And that's taken a lot of sort of arranging and rewriting scores and things like that. It's stuff I've done for a long time and really enjoy it, so it's been fun. So obviously it's getting the music together and getting the music out to the students, because it's very important for me that they had the music in plenty of time so that they can practice and be prepared rather than see it for the first time in New York. I think progress would be considerably slower if that was the case. So I was keen to get that music out to them as soon as I can, and then once that's out, it's a case of being very fortunate to be sort of working with lots and lots of very good sort of heads of music or music supervisors and consultants and all the people associated with different schools around the world who have all been very, very helpful with the support and offering to volunteer to help, and it's just a case of distributing talent around the group, so allocating teachers to work with certain groups and specialist groups. And in the case of the choir, vocal music is not my specialty as I'm a trombone player, so I've been very fortunate. There's some very experienced choral and singing directors, heads of music and other schools of music who have been able to help, and so it's facilitating that. Creating a rehearsal schedule, fitting it in and around the time that we have in various centres. And then the big one is once we get to New York and start playing and rehearsing, is sort of bringing it all together to get it all ready for the concert. Yeah.
So you mentioned the sort of requirements that you've given to students already. How did you manage to choose all of those ones? I mean, I know that you have to think about the different instruments and the different strengths of students, but with 87 students, how did you manage to get something that's topical and keeps their interest?
Yeah, that was one of the biggest challenges. I was very keen to give the musicians as wide a scale of experience and repertoire as I could. I didn't want to just focus it on one style or one, just orchestral music or just that. It was to get as wide a range of styles of music as we can. And I think we've done quite well. We're obviously limited because we have it's like 3 or 4 days of rehearsal. That's it. I mean, if we had months, then we could try tons of music. But I think I've covered. We've got some sort of traditional classical music, some traditional choral classical music with the four-air pavan. Bit of minimalism going into the 20th century with time lapse. Bit of film music with the Pirates of the Caribbean theme. Simon Cohen's music composition student in Chicago has produced an original piece of music for the course, which is pretty impressive because it's, there's no orchestra in the world will play that piece of music before us, which I think is kind of cool. And Simon's put a lot of work in it. He's produced a really nice piece of music, so I'm looking forward to people hearing that. Then obviously we've got electric guitar players, we've got brass players, we've got saxophone players, so I wanted to make sure that they were challenged as well with music that might be more appropriate for their instruments. So we've got like a Metallica tune, which is Metallica, a pretty heavy rock band. We've got a bit of jazz. For the chorus, for the choir, we've got traditional choral music. We've got sort of more lighter jazzy choral music. We've got a piece written by Gary Barlow, which is the thing he wrote for the Olympics. Was it the Olympics? I think it was the Olympics, 2012. So as wide a range as we can, and then our 3 talented piano players are representing. We've got a bit of Rachmaninoff, so a bit of romantic classical music. We've got a bit of Debussy, which is a bit of impressionist music, and then and then we've got the Up on the Roof concert where we're going to cover some more poppy things, and so I think we've kind of covered a huge period of time in terms of music. So I was keen for that to happen, rather than just be specifically aiming at 1 or 2 styles of music. But in terms of you mentioned the requirements prior to the event, I think the auditions were not, obviously it's important for us to see what talent we had out there, so the audition was one thing, but the difference between an audition and what will happen in New York is that probably the people who auditioned have been playing the piece they auditioned with for 4 or 5 months, 6, 7 months, sometimes a year possibly. They've probably known that piece really well, hence why they played it so well. The difference with that is that no one saw this music prior to 3 or 4 weeks before the course. So I'm very interested to see how people have coped with getting music quite late on, practicing like crazy, and then producing the goods within a short time scale, rather than spending weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks rehearsing the music.
So like trying to get them out of their comfort zone to see how they really work with the music.
Absolutely, because that's the challenge. And as a professional performer, many concerts and many performances I had to do were in that time scale where sometimes you got 1 or 2 little rehearsals and then the concert, but many concerts I've done, I received the music the day of the concert, and it was basically a case of, in 2 hours time you are performing this to an audience. Now I would never have put that level of pressure on the students we have in New York, but the idea of hitting the high standards quickly is something that I'm quite keen to challenge them on, definitely.
So it should make them sort of prepared for things that if they want to do music outside of school, that's the kind of thing which they should be prepared for.
Very much so, yeah. I mean, once you get, the higher the standard you get away from the school environment, the quicker people expect you to learn music, and that's one of the key factors of being a professional musician. Is the sooner you can play it, I wouldn't say perfectly, as soon as you can play it to the level required, the more employable you are, the more sort of attractive you are as a musician to someone who wants musicians. So yeah, so it's a big challenge. That's why sight reading is such an important aspect of a musical skill, definitely.
Yeah. Well, if there's going to be 87 students, how are you going to plan to keep them all performing cohesively together when they're going to be really excited about the trip in New York? Absolutely,
yeah. There's going to be a lot of different levels of jet lag. Like we've got some of the students coming from Chicago. It's like an hour and a half trip. Some people coming from the other side of the planet. So that's going to be a challenge, and I'm expecting some people to be quite woolly with their sort of, the first couple of days. It'll take them a while to get in. That's why I was keen for the music to be available to them as soon as possible, because the more preparation they can do running into New York, the more New York is going to be a stressless environment. So if people who are sight read get the music in New York, they've got 3 days to get it right before they perform it. That's quite a high stressful situation, but if the people have done the practice running up to New York, it should be a case of fine tuning and manipulating and that sort of thing. I don't think there's going to be a problem managing the group. I think they're all very, obviously very talented musicians. The videos spoke for themselves. I think it's going to be a case of guiding and directing the enthusiasm, making sure focus and the excitement levels don't get to the point where focus and concentration are lost. And then I think once the sort of focus is tuned in, I think then we can really start to create some great sounds and really work together to create a very, very high standard performance.
Yeah, so we've talked quite a lot about the music element of the orchestra. Obviously everybody's going to be in New York, which is a new place for pretty much every student who's going. So what do you think the importance is of students experiencing the cultural side of the trip, a new place?
Absolutely. I mean, New York is one of, you could name 5 or 6 cities around the world that's the cultural capitals of the world. In New York alone, they've got one of the best symphony orchestras in the world. They've got the Metropolitan Opera and all the ballet. Broadway is obviously famous around the world. It's got an incredible jazz scene and the pop music. It is just like you say, a cultural centre of the world, along with a few other cities. I think it's very significant that we're taking people to New York for that. I think in terms of the time that we're in New York and the opportunities for free time, we are only just going to scratch the surface of what is available to us in New York. But to be honest, just driving, in a taxi or a bus, you drive through New York and you see the culture of, you're in a kind of a cultural, musical hotbed, if you like. And I think just simply knowing you're in New York is a significant factor. It's like, I remember when I moved to London, and the very first time I ever sat in a theatre in London and played, I was doing the show Chicago, and I was on a stage, and it looked pretty much like every stage I'd ever been on. It was dark, the lights were in my face, I was playing for a show, and it was pretty much the same experience I'd had in many other theatres around the country, but it wasn't. It was London, and it was the West End, and so it was different, and it was special, and that's going to happen in New York. I think there's very few people who travel to New York to perform as a musician. It's sort of the only thing that's reserved for the very top professionals. You expect that, but we're sending students to New York to perform. So it's going to be absolutely, yeah, very much so. Very much so. I mean, it's not, we're not performing in the Lincoln Center or the Carnegie Hall or anything like that, but we're in a wonderful venue in one of the cultural musical capitals of the world. It's pretty incredible. I mean, I never had that opportunity before I was 18, so that's a phenomenal opportunity. Yeah.
What are you most looking forward to in the Global Orchestra?
That's a good question. I think the whole thing has been great. I love writing the music. It's going to be very special as an arranger to hear that played for the first time. It's going to be very special. Tingles down my neck when I hear my own music played. It's a bit arrogant, but I think for me, I've always been a performing musician. Whether I'm a teacher or whether I'm a player or whatever, I've always been a performing musician. So for me, the best bit about it will be when the baton comes down at the start of the concert, because that's what we're building up to. The auditions, the arranging, the sending of music, the practice that everyone's done, hopefully, the rehearsal, everything builds to the concert. So that's the thing I'm enjoying the most, and it's the performance, being able to show people what we've done, what work has gone into it, it's the kind of culminating event. That would be the most enjoyable thing.
Should be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you for taking the time, and this is musical director Mr. Wright, and we should hear more from you next week.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Hannah.